Do you ever wish that you could get out of your own head, or that if you could just quiet your mind from all the noise, the thoughts, the feelings that are going on, life would be just a little bit easier? Do you ever feel like sometimes you're your own worst critic? Well, let's talk about that today. I'm Dr. Chasity O'Connell from Thrive Wellbeing Center, and I'd like to take a few moments to talk about the inner critic. So let's look at what the inner critic experience is like for us. For many of us, it could be described as a number of feelings. So, for example, that feeling of irritability, that nagging sense of, oh, I'm not doing anything right. There's so many things that are falling through the cracks. It could be that feeling of worry that, oh, what am I missing? Oh, what if should I do that? No, what if I? So it's a mental sort of chess that goes on in our heads. For some of us, it can feel like that aching pit in our stomach of disappointment, of just feeling like things don't go the way we plan. Things just don't seem to turn out right. And you'll notice that as I was describing that, we were talking about feelings, but then sometimes we feel them very deeply in our body, that lump in our throat, that sinking feeling in the pit of our stomach, or sometimes that sort of jittery, on edge feeling that, we just can't seem to relax. And so that's one experience of the inner critic. What also goes on with the inner critic is the experience of thoughts, these things that we say to ourselves. Our mind tells us that, oh, you're not doing that right. They're just going to let you down. You're not going to figure it out. Why are you even bothering? You don't deserve a place at the table. And so those very, very difficult, painful thoughts that occur to us that keep our minds very noisy, very cluttered. And in some ways, I use this analogy sometimes in working with clients, that when we try to approach a task, so let's say we're about to sit down and finish up some work, whether it be responding to emails, writing a report. Before we even get there, there's like this flurry of different painful, difficult, worrisome thoughts and feelings that kind of get in the way, that make it really hard for us to approach it. And so the analogy I use is almost like a snow plow. Like there's this blizzard of really difficult thoughts and feelings where we're bombarded by our inner critic, and we're trying to just clear a path to the task that we're trying to approach. Sometimes the task could be something as simple as trying to cook dinner. Oh, nobody likes your cooking anyway. Those negative thoughts that come up. Or trying to interact and play with our children. Oh, so now you're going to actually sit down and spend some time with your kids? Or, whenever I do, they're always fighting or unhappy or upset or telling me something that I've done wrong. And so in these experiences, this isn't to discount reality. Sometimes life is really hard and there are these very real, difficult experiences. But sometimes our interpretation of those events gets a little bit skewed. And that skew comes from our inner critic. And it's important to take a little bit of time to explain what the inner critic is, because that's going to be important for later, because it's going to help us understand different ways that we might relate to it. So our inner critic is there in many ways to protect us. It's there to try, and if it tells us, oh, don't even bother, it's trying to protect us from trying something where we might feel disappointed. Or if it's telling us they don't really like you, they really don't, it's doing that so we won't approach friends, or we won't approach someone that seems interesting and talk with them. Instead, we'll play it safe. We'll stay back. And in that, we stay safe, but we also don't have the benefit of social interactions. We also don't have the benefit of new information that's going to challenge the inner critic and say, oh, gosh, they seem to like me. So maybe there's something likable about me after all. So in those situations, we are brought away from the things that we care about, and we find it difficult to approach them. And the outcome is that we stay safe, but we also stay small. We also stay in our little worlds. We also don't allow that inner critic to have new information to challenge it. So you can see on one hand, it's there to protect us from possible hurts, disappointments, moments of anger, frustration, but it goes into overdrive. It's kind of like a callus. I don't know if you've ever played guitar. I haven't, but well, I tried a long time ago. And I noticed that you build up these calluses on your fingers, but before you get the calluses, it's quite painful and it hurts. But you have those calluses there that enable you to still play guitar, but without much pain. But think of that inner critic as like callus into overdrive, where now they're so big, you can't even play the guitar. I don't know if that analogy worked for you, but just tossing it out there. So think of the overcritic as our protection instinct in overdrive. So we need to rein that in. So what are some of the things that we can do to help rein in our inner critic? One of those suggestions could be just noticing and thanking it, relating to it differently. When we notice that sinking feeling, we notice those difficult thoughts, we notice those difficult feelings showing up, or even images of where we have tried something and failed, or embarrassed ourselves, or got something wrong and it felt humiliating, or it felt disappointing. Those can come into our mind as well. So it's not just feelings and thoughts, it's also images as well. So when those come up for us, when we find that we're being bombarded, we can thank our inner critic. So relate to it differently and saying, all right, inner critic, sometimes we can give it a name. We can call it Francine. We can call it Maya, whatever you want to call your inner critic. Thank you for showing up. I know you're trying to protect me, but I got this. I can do this right now. I know it's not going to be easy. I know I might be nervous about it. I know I'm not feeling great about myself, but I got this. And I thank you for trying to protect me. So that's one way we can work with our inner critic, is just noticing it, thanking them, and putting them and trying to gently push it to the side. Another image that I use with clients sometimes is a snowplow. Like when you see those thoughts coming and preventing you from approaching something that's important to you, or trying something new, or doing something that makes us feel a little anxious, we can call to mind the image of a snowplow or a shovel in a sandstorm. I don't know if that's such an effective one. No, let's stick with the snowplow image. So the snowplow sort of clearing a path for us, and it can feel, what this does is it honors just how effortful it can be to push past these really dark thoughts and feelings, or difficult thoughts and feelings that come up from the inner critics. So as we're approaching, let's say we set aside some time to play with our children, and we're worried that they're going to start fighting, and we're going to get activated or frustrated. And that voice is like, well, it wouldn't be like this if you spent more time with them, or, oh, they're spoiled by their grandmother. And so all that stuff that, again, keeps us from approaching the task. We just notice it, and just imagine taking a deep breath in and almost like visually or realistically snowplowing through it. And just saying, and gently pushing it to the side. We're not trying to fight it. We're just almost like scooping it to the side so we can take a step forward, further, closer, and toward the thing that we're trying to do. Another thing that we can do with our inner critic are some cognitive exercises. And these are challenging our thoughts, challenging what our inner critic is saying to us. So one of the things that we can do is call to mind a specific thought that the inner critic is telling us. So if it's saying, oh, you're not good enough, you're not going to do that right. One of the things, the prompts that we can use, is we can ask for evidence. We can say, that's not true, because there are a number of examples where I've had a great time playing with my children, or I've handed in a report and it was really, really a solid piece of work. So yeah, this is hard. So it's not about cheerleading and, pushing aside the negative or ignoring reality. It's about calling to mind and balancing out what that inner critic is saying to us. We can also reframe it. So again, if we're calling to mind something difficult that we're working with, like, someone we might want to talk to or approach, with COVID, as things start opening up in the UAE, we might be a little rusty on our social skills. And so we might want to reach out to people, and we might shy away from it because we think, oh, they're so busy. They don't want to talk to me. They've got so much going on. I don't know. I won't do it. We can reframe it, and we can say a more helpful way to look at this is, so using that prompt, a more helpful way to look at this is, I'm nervous. I'm feeling a little uneasy. It's been a long time since I've been like actively approaching people, not through a screen. And so of course I'm going to feel a little nervous, and that's okay. So a more helpful way to look at this is that I'm just feeling what any person would feel naturally in this kind of situation where they're trying to make friends or meet someone new. And in that statement, there's a lot of skill work. There's some self-compassion, sort of honoring our own feelings. There's some self-validation around, of course, it's natural. There's some common humanity when we're saying, of course, people would feel this way. A lot of people are feeling uneasy right now. There's also some kindness, being kind to ourselves. Ooh, that's the antidote to the inner critic. And so, with some of these strategies, just some things to put in your back pocket, whether it be relating to the inner critic differently, thanking them, acknowledging them, saying, I can see you're trying to protect me. The snowplow analogy, where we're not trying to necessarily engage with the thoughts and feelings. We're just trying to gently push past them so we can approach tasks or activities that have value to us, that have meaning to us, that are important for us. Or our sentence prompts, which are, this is not true because. A more helpful way to look at this is because. And sometimes I have people ask me, so, when we're talking about the inner critic, isn't it good to have someone kind of pushing you and, those like telling you not good enough, and that way you'll try even harder? Well, there's just room for discussion there. But if we think about how human beings respond, we respond a lot better to nurturance and encouragement than we do to criticizing and punishing tactics. And so when we're trying to work toward excellence, we can think about trying to encourage ourselves to we can think about trying to encourage ourselves. We can think about, what do I need to help myself grow? So it's a different way of understanding ourselves rather than talking really negatively and hoping that that encourages us to do something good. In the same way, you wouldn't take a plant and stick it in a closet and expect it to grow. We can't do that with ourselves. So again, I'm Dr. Chasity from Thrive Wellbeing Center, and I hope that this has been a little helpful window into the inner critic and has given you something to think about. Thank you again for your time.